Hello and welcome back to Whistle Watch, the hot seat. Now today we're talking pressure and I mean pressure. This guy knows more about pressure I think than anybody. Served in the British Army for 30 years as an Apache helicopter pilot and even worked alongside Prince Harry. Nick Pugh.
Fair play.
Croeso, welcome.
Fair play. Conflict zones, leadership zones. This guy has seen pressure in every form, Nigel. Rugby has played a part of your life along the way as well. And so if anyone knows what the stakes are like at their highest, it's this guy. We're going to start Army, 1990, October, this time of year. You joined the Army. Tell us why, tell us when, tell us how.
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a pilot ever since I could remember. My uncle was a flying instructor. And every birthday and Christmas present, I had a flying lesson from about the age of 8. And for some reason, I wanted to fly helicopters. I wasn't necessarily interested in planes. The sort of dream of levitating, being able to stop in the space was just captivating to me. And it was just a dream that I, absolutely wanted to realise. And I actually tried to join the military when I was 16, but my parents wouldn't sign the paperwork. So off I went to college. Did some other stuff, and then by the time I got to 20, I thought I've got to do this thing. I've got to scratch the itch, and I joined up, and I served an apprenticeship essentially, where I served on the ground for a number of years, and then was lucky enough to pass the pilot selection and grading, and then was selected to be an Army pilot.
How difficult is the process of being selected? The training and the exams, the studying, difficult?
Yeah. Well, so I left school with very little. But I think when you apply yourself and you desperately want to achieve something, you can throw yourself into it. Many years ago, we used to select people who had good psychomotor skills, so hand-eye coordination. And you needed a fair amount of capacity as well to be able to, operate the controls, speak on a radio, use a map, communicate to other people, understand, a bigger picture when you were flying, particularly at low level, fast. Now, the aircrafts are far more automated, and so we don't need that same sort of reliance on psychomotor skill. What we do need, though, is people who've got great amounts of capacity to be able to absorb lots of data and lots of information and make a decision, particularly, in a high-stress environment.
Right, so Nick, first couple of years in the military, what was it like as a young man? I'm sure we can both rewind to when we were 16, 17, 18, going into that environment. I assume a lot of older heads there. What was that like? Just take us back.
Yeah, so what was beneficial for me, funny enough, was the rugby. I played rugby from the age of 11. Wasn't a really early starter, but I certainly played my rugby at club level.
Where was that? What club was that?
So I started at adult rugby at Ledbury.
Ledbury.
Oh, yeah, good club.
Yeah.
Have you spoken there? No?
Yeah, a couple of times. Good crowd there, good crowd.
Yeah, good crowd.
Friendly crowd.
And so what I found was as soon as people found I played rugby, I was in the rugby team, and then you open up a whole new sort of tribal dynamic. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's a tribe essentially, isn't it? Yep. And then you end up in a tribe inside a tribe. So, rugby was quite a key feature. Particularly living in Germany where you're isolated. There was a heavy rugby league presence within the military units, and we played rugby on Wednesdays and we played rugby on Saturdays. So, that was the key focus, and it gave me something to, sort of aim for. It gave me, a reason to be part of a team. Thoroughly enjoyable.
And you grow up quickly, right, in that environment. Yeah. Often at 16, 18, a lot of your peers are mid-30s, for example. Yeah. Everyone becomes the same age, really, don't they?
Yeah, you've got to take a bit of stick, and most of the time for the right reasons.
I'm sure you could dish it out as well. Yeah.
But later on it's your turn. Yeah. So there's an apprentice sort of level to this. But no, absolutely. You have to take a bit.
Yeah, what position were you?
So I actually was second row, and then I did a bit of flank. I think, if my time was later on, I'd probably be in the backs. Yeah. It was just, how people were built differently then. And I also, professional rugby hadn't started. So, you weren't playing rugby to try and achieve a professional contract. You were playing rugby because it was part of the clan, part of being part of something, belonging.
And you were in the army for 3 decades,
Mm-hmm.
1990 till 2018?
2021 is when I left. Yeah, so 31 years is what it...
31 years.
Yeah.
And tell us about some of those campaigns. Are you allowed to tell us some of the campaigns you were on
Yeah.
in those 30 years?
Yeah.
When
So...
you say campaigns, it's like Six Nations in November.
Well, they are, I mean, they are
Oh,
classed
isn't
as
it? I mean,
campaigns.
it's similar, isn't it?
So I served in pretty much most of the conflicts we had going on. I don't think they're still ever classified as wars, but they certainly look like wars from where I was sat. But I served in Northern Ireland, I served in Kosovo, in the Balkans, Iraq in 2003 as a helicopter pilot, and then of course Afghanistan. I did a couple of tours in Afghanistan as well, and then some other little minor conflicts and issues that the UK government supported in the margins as well.
Brilliant. And what would be a main role in those wars? Was it flying military personnel in and out of zones? Was it, did you have weapons on the aircraft as such? You learn how to, did you have to train how to fight with a helicopter?
So I flew 2 different types of helicopter over my career. I flew the Gazelle helicopter, which had a number of different roles. One was anti-tank, so going looking for enemy armour, low level. We would sight it, find it, report it, and then we bring in other assets to destroy it. So that was one role, and then as time developed, as a counter-surgeon threat developed, I then moved into that role, which was all done at high level with surveillance cameras. And so, and I actually deployed to Iraq with surveillance cameras flying at altitude. So, that's that. Put that to one side, and then when I moved into Apache, you're there to support ground forces. In simple terms, if you think of an infantier, they may have a heavy machine gun, they might have some form of rocket, and they might have a rifleman who engaged with the enemy. And so the Apache helicopter that I flew does all of that. It's essentially a heavy weapons section, which also has a lot of sensors on board to be able to go and find and prosecute the enemy.
Oh, you remember that not just the pressure of actually flying in those zones, but so where did the actual decision come from? If you had to do something, it would come to you, I guess, or were you able, or sometimes would you have to make that decision yourself? I just can't imagine the pressure on doing that.
So it's a great question, because UK Apache pilots are given a fair amount of autonomy, but you're only given that autonomy because you spend a good part of 18 months training to get yourself in this position where you can make good decisions. And throughout your training process, you build up a very good relationship with a legal advisor, with a lawyer who is based with you permanently. We had a team on the ground that would mimic certain environments and certain situations that have been seen in the past. Let's say a hostage situation, or a missing soldier, or a set of troops that have been overrun and the enemy have got inside their compound. So we would build those scenarios on the ground. We'd have forces on the ground that would replicate those environments, and then we would go through a whole set of processes to decide whether or not we could, well, in fact, the phrase we use is must, should, or could we engage the enemy. And so you only get to that position of responsibility once you've been practicing it for so long, getting it wrong countless times, and then over time getting it right more often than not. So by the time you actually deploy to your operational theatre, you come packaged with a set of rules of engagement, and so you know what you can do and what you can't do, and that legal advisor will deploy with you. And so in every engagement that you make, the first thing you do is replay the tapes, and they're kept in perpetuity. They're held on file. Still, all my engagements are held there now. And once you've gone through the process with your boss and then with the weapons officer, of whether or not you did the right thing and whether you used the right weapon system, we call it weapon to target matching, you then move on to the legal aspect. You'll run the tapes through again, and then the legal advisor will literally pick apart everything you did and then say, yes, you were within the correct law of armed conflict.
As a referee, you couldn't get emotionally attached to the game or to a player. You just had to deal with the facts and whatever you felt was right to do. you'd have to detach yourself emotionally totally from what you were doing, would you?
Yeah, you compartmentalise it. There is no time for emotion, and not only that, you might move from one engagement to another. You might do 3 in one sortie. So
are you trained this then to deal with emotion, or is this something that's naturally in you, or did you get training on it? And you must be very good at detaching yourself from the emotion, then, are you?
That's another really good question. I think
Well, I've asked 2 good questions today.
Yeah. I think I mean, we do a fair amount of psychological profiling, and we tend to find that most of the people that end up in the Apache program were similar types of people, high achievers, stable, extroverts or introverts. We don't select for that, but when we actually do this stuff retrospectively, but we found that tends to be the case. I think it's all about repetition. I think it's a bit like refereeing a rugby game. You get better at it the more you probably referee. And the same with playing rugby. You become desensitized to it because of the amount of games you're playing. You don't get wowed by the big events as much as you did when you got your first cap. It's probably that same sort of thing. You'll always remember your first engagement, but everything else in the middle, I have fleeting memories of them, but I don't remember them with the same sort of granularity. So certainly the brain is processing things differently as time has gone on. It doesn't mean to say that you don't engage a target lightly. You're not doing it, without applying all exactly the same processes. But I think you just naturally process the event differently. But I think most of it comes from the fact that you've done a lot of work in the simulator, a lot of work with the legal advisor, and if you know what you're doing is right by law and it's morally right as well, then you can live with the decision quite easily.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about leadership. And you went from being a pilot to then becoming chief of staff at an Apache station. Am I right?
I was head of training.
Head of training.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was an officer commanding, so I ran a squadron.
Obviously, experience got you to that role. And did your outlook on leadership change when you became a leader of people? So when I expect when you obey rank in the military, leadership is far more. How can I say it? It puts to levels than it is in our sport. Obviously, you'd have your boss as a referee. I'd have my head coach. It's probably far more inclusive. But there's defined leadership roles within the army, isn't there? So when you climb that rank and you start looking after people, how did you find that? How do you adapt to that?
Yeah. So ultimately, by the time I ran the training school, we would deploy to the USA frequently. I would be responsible for 220 people. It's a lot of folk to manage, and of course what you have to do is give them leadership and direction. And what we do very well in the British military is a thing called mission command. And what that means is I will set you your goals, and I'll set you your boundaries, and I'll give you a timeline, and then I expect you to achieve it. And I don't expect to keep constantly asking where you are with this. You can report to me every few days or so, and then we'll see how far we've got through the process. So, the difference between, leadership and management. And so management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right thing. And having that balance of experience, experience helps you navigate that cycle of what is the right thing or making the right decision at the right time. And so you're using your experience to help fettle you through that. But there's never always, a solution that you can write on paper and say, this is the way you should be dealing with something. Sometimes you have to use your own personal judgment.
And what were your biggest challenges as a leader?
Homosexuality was illegal. I had friends I knew were gay, but we just didn't say anything.
But
I had a female friend who was kicked out of the military for being gay, which is now one of those people that's going through the case, and then later on, I had gay soldiers serving under my command. No step change, which had never been an issue in the first place. The same with females in the military. What I thought could be an issue actually absolutely was not an issue, because it's like water, it just finds its way.
So those serving under you, dealing with their sexuality, they from my own experience as well, they must have felt huge pressure in living that lie, I guess. Did you feel that pressure, and were you living that lie with them then? Did you know, and what did that feel like for you then? Because a sense of command, duty, where, how did you deal with all that?
Like, again, I use the word, compartmentalisation. It's very easy to do so. When somebody's able to do their job, somebody's able to be effective, and, why should the sexuality have played a part in it? And I remember when I was a young soldier, there was a guy in my unit who was father of 4 who went AWOL. And then we found out he went AWOL because actually he was gay. And he just left his family and we never saw him again. He was on the run, gone. And that's not just one person's life change. You've got another 5 other people, a whole family, ripped apart because of a anachronistic process. And I knew there were officers in my unit when I was a soldier. I knew were gay. It was just, you just never mentioned it.
Yeah.
It was not an issue. But the process, the policymakers made it an issue. And I think the military then were quite religious. You were expected to go to church. And I mean, we're in a far, far better place because of that.
Is that the case now?
No.
That quite religious? No.
No, and I think with the amount of Commonwealth soldiers that we have, many with different religions, I think we're far more cosmopolitan, to use a phrase. And I think we're far better off for it. I mean, I did my Masters in Leadership and Management, and I focused on diverse groupings. Yeah. And I actually did a study on Army pilots and what they were like 60 years ago versus 30 years ago, up to today. And it's actually quite fascinating to see how they were selected and how we select now. Because in the past, most senior officers were white, heterosexual. They went to Russell Group universities. They went to the same private schools. We haven't got that now.
It's probably quite a lot of sectors, right?
Yeah. And in fact, on commissioning, one of the first questions you'd be asked is, "What does your father do for a living?" Now the question is, well, why do you want to come flying?
Yes.
What school did you go to? What did your father do for a living?
Yeah.
It's probably the last question you'd ever ask anybody these days.
And you worked alongside Prince Harry. That must have brought. You worked with him? Did you train him? That must have brought its different pressure when you had somebody like a royal family member as well with you. Yeah.
So my relationship with Prince Harry probably wasn't as close as some people's, but we were in Afghanistan at this. In fact, he was going through his Apache course whilst I was at Watchesham around the same sort of time. I knew him in the mess from Middle Wallop as well. And so, but we weren't in the same squadron, but we were in the same unit. When he then, so I'd already been in Afghanistan for 6 months or so, his squadron then conducted what we call a RIP, the relief in place. So
they'd relieve you then?
Yeah, they relieve us. So in order to sort of, get them through their sort of indoctrination and their process of becoming accustomed to operating there, they would partner you up with somebody who'd already been there for a while. So I took Prince Harry on his first mission. He was the second aircraft of my patrol. So
you had to boss a royal round, did you?
Well, and
did you listen?
He was very, very good. And I tell you what, he was very, very good with the soldiers as well. And
it must be a hard place to be, isn't it?
Well, I always used to come across him, because he's a big England rugby fan, and I refereed England quite a few times in big games. I remember I did England's New Zealand in the semi-final of the World Cup in 2019, and he's coming through the change rooms. I just coming off the end of the game, and he shouted out something like, because I've seen him a few, not that I know him well, but he always had a conversation. He'd always say, "Nigel, good luck today," or he shouted out once, "Don't forget now, even though you're Welsh, mind, make sure you do your job right." And so, I always found him really, really down to earth. And after the semi-final, he came, I was sitting in the corridor at the end of the game, and he kind of chatted to me about 5-6 minutes before he went into the New Zealand change rooms and then the England change rooms and stuff like that, So I can imagine him being a good person to sort of work with, I would imagine, would he?
Yeah, I think what we saw, which was different, I think, to what many other people saw, was the fact that we didn't have the cameras. We had no press intrusion. He could actually be himself. Yeah. And we had a rule in the mess where, we'd keep our phones out the way. Everybody just completely played the game so he could relax as much as possible. And in fact, one anecdote, I took a friend, a female friend, to dinner in the mess who wanted to join the Army Air Corps. And we sat down for dinner, and then Harry H, as he was known to us, sat opposite. And I completely forgot that he was there. And then he sat there talking away, and I just looked at her, and she had her mouth open. She couldn't speak. She couldn't eat. I had to sort of give her a nudge and say, it's just a normal bloke. Just talk normally to him. And then we had a few drinks afterwards, and she settled into it, and she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe how normal.
Correct me if I'm wrong, both Harry and William are helicopter pilots.
Yeah, so Harry...
North Wales, William, didn't he?
Yeah, so we knew the boys when they were really young, because their father, the king, as he was then Prince Charles, was our Colonel-in-Chief. Oh, okay. So he would frequently come to Wattisham, and we'd be asked to look after the boys. So we knew them growing up, and actually William wanted to fly Apaches. Harry wasn't that fussed about it. Of course, they couldn't really put Future King into a platform like we were flying, and the sort of compromise, as I understood it, was he went on to search and rescue, did a fantastic load of work there. But interestingly, he then, when he finished that role, went to Cambridge Air Ambulance. Now, most of the guys that left and went flying helicopters were ex-Apache pilots, were all based in Cambridge Air Ambulance. So we all knew, there was a sort of circle of friends that all knew each other, and sort of, it sort of, I think, helped the process. And then Harry, once he'd been outed in the press on his first tour, he was given an option from Richard Dannett, Lord Dannett as he is now, if you want to continue in the army, and you want to still do operational work, then probably the Army Air Corps for you. And what helped us at the time, our regimental colonel, was Richard Dannett. So he was our general, and Harry took the bait and came across. And he was, I have to say, he was excellent. He's a really good operator. Brilliant.
Right, back to pressure, and we've experienced it at different parts of our lives in our various lines of work. I can only imagine the pressure of flying in war zone, having people inside your helicopter, and one wrong move, there's lives at risk, right? How on earth did he deal with that? And when you reflect on that now, I won't say retired, that'd probably be insulting to you. He's probably still training quite a lot of young people. But when you reflect on that, how did he deal with that? What was that like? You talk about compartmentalising. Did you know how important your job was?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Before you would start work, you would have that sick feeling.
Yeah. So you'd still be nervous?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, you would dwell on, I just don't want it to be me that would make a mistake. Yeah. Because making a mistake is going to cost lives. Yeah. I just hope I can do my job as best as I possibly can, as I've been trained to be. But you can very easily make the wrong selection in the cockpit, say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and there are catastrophic consequences of your decision making. Which is why, certainly in Apache, you have a two-crew concept where you challenge and respond to each other. And you sometimes what happens is when you get capacity saturated, what you see in the periphery, suddenly you're now looking down a straw, and your vision starts to close in. And that's where you check each other, and it's the same for the person in the back. I was a front seater, so I operated the weapons systems. And the person in the back, who's flying the aircraft can actually help you and keep you on the...
You're two pilots then, was there?
Yeah.
Always two?
Yeah, always two on an Apache.
So there's like similarities in our line of work, right? So,
yeah.
As Nigel, you've got TMOs, everyone's working as a team,
yep.
All leaders, and similar kind of senior player groups on a rugby field. It's never one person leading, is it? It's a couple of people for that exact reason. I mean, look, it's magnified in the military, but...
Yeah, there are huge amounts of parallels. In sport, particularly in team sport, but it's very, very much a team game. The brief process before you go out the door, going and flying the mission, it's not just about, you'll land back on, you'll need to get rearmed, refueled. So there's a team of 6 people to do that. And these are people that you work with frequently. If they get their job wrong, then there's again a catastrophic consequence in that the aircraft can't fly and go and support those people on the ground that need your help. You're then talking to other agencies. It's another part of the team, people you never see. You might never see them again. And you're putting a lot of trust in their judgment as well as your own. And then when you get back and then go through the debrief process. So, yeah, it is absolutely...
Where does the buck end then? So as a referee, yes, you get a team around.
Yeah.
As a player, you've got the team. You can be subbed if things are not going well. As a referee, you can't be subbed. You've got a team around you. But at the end of the day, if a decision is wrong, it ends with you because you have the final say. Where did that sit with you then? Did you have the final decision, or where was the final decision? Well,
final decision on, must I, should I, could I take this shot is down to that mission commander in the aircraft.
and that'd be you on occasions?
Yeah, it's absolutely me. And if you make the wrong decision, it's you in court. There is no Crown immunity. You will be held to account for your actions.
How do you deal with that pressure?
I can see he loves it
Yeah.
though. Loves the pressure. I can see it in you.
I just think you're so well trained and you're programmed because of that training. And I have to keep coming back to the parallels of what you did, whether you were playing for your country, you make that snap decision. At that moment in time, you believed it was the right decision.
Yeah.
But what if why did you make the right decision? You made the right decision because of all the other times you've had to make a decision. Do you know? And you can make it that quick because you've seen it before.
You're a product of your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So
are you able to tell us the biggest decision you had to make? That's a no.
No, the trouble is I don't want it to come across as crass.
What was the biggest pressure what is the moment when you felt the biggest pressure on making what would be the biggest decision, I guess?
I think probably one of many, which I think really lends itself to frustration. There was an American Special Forces unit that were trapped in a compound, and the Taliban were on 3 sides of that compound. They'd had 2 individuals very badly wounded. They would just get shot at from all angles, and they had to blow holes in the walls inside the buildings so they could take their casualties through the building. It wasn't particularly large, and we were called onto the scene, and I tried to get in touch with them. And you tried the primary frequency, which is what we call in red, so nobody can hear what you're saying. They weren't there. I could see them. I couldn't speak to them. It was very what we call kinetic, so lots of ammunition flying around. I then tried the secondary channel, not on there, and I'm thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? Because I've got to speak to them. I need to come up with a plan. And it was only when I went into what we call a tertiary frequency, so the last ditch attempt in the green, so everybody could actually hear what was going on. I managed to get in touch with them. And so they called up and said, well, we really need some help. You need to put some suppressing fires into these tree lines, which were only about 50 metres away from their compound, so very close. We call that danger close.
Sorry, when you said everybody can hear you, Taliban and
stuff? If they have some form of listening capability, they could hear the conversations, but it was the only way we could operate. And so Apache carries a lot of ordnance. You carry a mixture of 30mm, which are like, essentially, they have a 5-metre kill radius, so they're a grenade, right? And you're gonna carry anywhere between 500 and 700 of those. We carry 2 types of rocket, one which has got a point detonating head, which means everybody within a 15-metre radius will be injured, if not killed. Another one which is flechette, so it's like a dart, a tungsten dart, so no explosive content, but will allow the rounds to go through tree canopies. And then you have the Hellfire missile, which we can fire at 8 kilometres. The new ones can go up to 16 kilometres away. So you can imagine the range and scale of that. And so in that particular engagement, I'd shot everything except for 50 rounds of 30mm, which was our get out of jail free card if we needed it. And it still wasn't enough. And what I ended up doing was bringing in other aircraft and other Apaches on board, and then they dealt with it all day, all night. And whilst I was on that mission, knowing that I was running low on ammunition, they brought in 2 Pedro helicopters that have para-rescuemen on board, which are paramedics. And they called in, there was a lull in the fighting, they called in the first helicopter, and as it landed on, I saw the Taliban suddenly engage them from inside that tree line about 25 feet away. And they shot that aircraft up. And they had to disappear off, and I thought that whole crew, they must all be shot. There's no way they got away with it. Not one bullet hit them. It went through the cabin area, it went through windows.
They all survived.
They all survived, and they went round and came back again. And that's how I ended up using all my ammunition, so they could come in and actually get these 2 casualties out. But
Did you get them out?
yeah, they got them out. Yeah, got them out. And I got back from that mission.
I thought ref in the World Cup final was difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one where, good outcomes. I was really low on fuel. I was considering having to shut an engine down so I could halve my fuel flow, which is a really big no-no,
Kind of rational decision making in the heat of the battle, right? I'm sure you can.
Just trying to keep on station for as long as possible to be able to have an effect.
Yeah. It's a bit like, I remember my old refereeing coach telling me, as a referee, you need to look like a swan in a lake, if everything looks so graceful, but underneath your bloody legs are going flat out. So you inside you must have been churning around, were you?
Yeah, and it comes back to that. You want to make the right decision, but you don't want to let these people down, because there are lives at stake, and you've got to operate. You can't just melt. You can't not function, because people are they're hanging their hats on you. They're expecting you to be able to operate.
Yeah. So it's a position of trust as well, isn't it? You talk about the team. It relies on absolute trust of everyone.
Yeah. So I relied on a method that I created called communication, teamwork, trust, and so communication. Something I developed over time and realised was communication's about more listening than actually speaking. People think leaders are just there to stand up on the table and keep shouting at people. Well, actually, no. It's about understanding everybody inside your team, and then once you fully understand them, having a different method that they all react to differently. That you can have that you can hook them in and get them to work better for you. So communication, that then leads to better teamwork, and then once the team is formed and everybody, probably all heard the phrase form, norm, storm, perform. But I mean that's absolutely true. So once the team is formed and it becomes cohesive, then you all start to trust each other, and then when you trust each other, the team starts performing even better. But you just keep going around in this cycle of communication, teamwork, trust.
How did you deal with things that went wrong then? Things must have gone wrong.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you've got to be. You have a culture of honesty, absolute honesty. So when we learn to fly, if you think of it in percentages, every time the student is assessed, you're looking at 90% of learning. So it's all it's critical learning. So you're debriefing the student in a very negative sense about 90% of the sortie that they've done. Now the 10% of the sortie that's gone well, you don't tell them about. That's a given. But it's probably about 90% of it where you go, right, you did this, you could have done that better, but you give them, show them the cause, the effect, and how you can make it better next time. And that's what we're looking for, an error rate profile that is, exponential. Because then what happens is the student gets better over time, and their learning processes increase, their capacity increases, their performance increases. So, having that as the sort of foundation stone of all of that stuff, we're always hypercritical on each other. So for everything we ever did, we would do the debrief. If the mission was 3 hours long, we'd replay the tape for 3 hours. And then we'd stop the tape and go, right, why did you say that? What were you doing then? What was your thought process then? Everybody learns from it. And then you carry on the tape. And we learn far more from each other that way. It doesn't mean to say that you're never going to make any mistakes. Your mistakes still happen, but they're just reduced. But what does happen is your decision making gets better.
Exactly, yeah. It's the same as refereeing, really, and I suppose the same as playing as well. The more experience you get, not that experience comes for everything, but it does contribute. The better you get, the less mistakes you make. And the mistakes you make don't really matter. They get lost in the game. If you miss a miss a forward pass in the 10th minute and nothing comes from it. Whereas if you miss a big forward pass at the end of the game and the opposition team win, then that mistake matters. So, you know, how then did you ever do big mistakes along that journey? And how did you react to that pressure of, this is a big mistake, I got this wrong?
Yeah, so in training, I made many mistakes. I'd get lost.
But they were in training?
But they were in training, yeah. I'd get lost. I might have used the wrong weapon system at the wrong time. I might have accidentally engaged somebody I shouldn't have, maybe in a simulator, maybe a friendly force. And you're devastated. You wear that heavy. And what gets you through it is when you're in that culture of honesty and you say to your mates, I did this, and many of them will go, yeah, I've done it as well. I did that myself, or the old hand will say, yeah, hey, look, you've got to get better, but yeah, we've done that. We've been around that boy. So, and like I said, because of the amount of times you're doing it, when you go and do it operationally, I was very, very fortunate that I didn't make any major mistakes. I made some small ones, but I didn't make any major mistakes. Some people made some mistakes and we learned from it. But that's because of that was in the early days of the campaign. And we learned then what was right, what was the right habit, what was the right process, what was the right mechanism we should have been operating. But we're harder on ourselves than we are on each other. You know yourself when you've made a mistake. If you knock a ball on in the World Cup final, and it costs you the game.
They didn't get there. What about mistakes? Have you made mistakes in your playing career which were big mistakes? I mean, game-changing mistakes, and it was all on you, or were you quite lucky when the mistakes didn't really matter?
No, definitely made big mistakes. Drop balls when the game's in the balance, or missed a tackle that has led to tries, which has meant you've lost. As you said, mate, you've got to wear it. It's never perfect, is it? But ultimately, when we do sport, Nigel, it's sport at the end of the day, and that's where respect to you and your service. Thanks so much for your service and certainly your honesty. Is those mistakes are catastrophic. You get that wrong. It's a bit different, isn't it? But currently, my line of work now, I work as a doctor now, so I'm very well aware that mistakes, can cost lives. So it's great to hear you speak, and I resonate with it somewhat, but I just can't imagine in the heat of the battle what that feels like. I mean, it must feel like a drug, mind, like the adrenaline, the buzz, and that's why I assume you did it for 31 years. It must have felt like a drug.
You miss it?
If I'm going to be honest, and I have to be honest with myself,
I'm
talking about this culture of honesty.
Night, so yeah.
You realise that as you get older, you're not as sharp as you were. Your capacity levels, they do diminish over time. The brain cells aren't getting better over time. They're sort of diminishing. And whilst you have experience to lean into, you're not as fast as you were. Not just in the decision making, but in the operating the aircraft. And I think, you realise, these kids are sharp. These mid-20-year-olds are so much quicker than you at the things that they do, and their rate of learning is so much better than you. And you're getting by on experience. Okay. And I think I miss being part of the organisation. I do miss flying every now and again.
You don't fly at all now, then, do you?
No. But I do recognise that my time is done.
It comes a time where that time is coming, isn't it?
Father time, they call
it. Yes, yeah.
I mean, at Hereford...
Every dog has its day, as they say.
Well, yeah, I mean, at Hereford, they have a saying, with 2-2 SAS, you beat the clock. When you finish your service and you survived, because they have a clock there, and if you died, you pass away, you have your name on the bottom of the clock, which is all at the base of the clock. So they call it beating the clock. And, I do look back and think, well, we... Just out of one rugby team, my army rugby team, we lost 2 guys to cancer, we lost 2 guys in Bosnia, we lost 1 guy in Iraq, and we lost 2 guys in Afghanistan. That's 7 from one team.
Just one team.
And we celebrate those people in a sevens tournament we do each year, and we have a cup named, a cup and a plate and a trophy named after those people. Wow. And yeah, I mean, it sort of brings it home to you. It's only in retrospect though. It's only lately that I've sort of dwelled on that and thought, you know, those people aren't around anymore. And the way you sort of reconcile it when you're in is it's like they've been posted, like they've been moved to another team. They're still around, they're still alive. You don't. It's only later on, and you take a breath, and you've left, that you suddenly go, oh blimey, you know. That's pretty conclusive.
Before we finish off, any regrets on the rugby field or even in the helicopter?
I think
Should have played in the backs.
yeah, I should have played in the back.
It's good looking, isn't it? Good looking.
Easy job.
Yeah, I think I think I was very lucky. My time was right. I achieved everything I wanted to achieve. I don't have any regrets in my military career. I'm pretty content, which I think is a nice place to be. I have some regrets on decision making that I have now. I'm out and I'm trying to sort of carve my way through into retirement. Yeah. But no.
Well, you're living that a bit later than we've had to live it. I mean, Nigel leaving the refereeing, me leaving, pro rugby at 35. It's a challenging journey when you retire, isn't it? It's kind of.
But I think what's helped, it's probably helped you as well, is the fact you were going in to do something that you always wanted to do in medicine and being a doctor. Yeah. I was sort of farming now, something I always wanted to do. So there's no doubt it helped that transition. When you left, did you have any plan? Did you go into something you wanted to do, or was it just, this is it, I'm done?
Yeah, it was, and I think I left during COVID. And when you've been part of an organisation where the whole raison d'etre is belonging, and then you leave into nothing, and I did a job where I worked from home, and you're staring at the skirting boards, thinking, oh, that could do with a lick of paint. That's probably the highlight of your day. Or I'll go and walk the dog, the second highlight of the day. Yeah. I'll go and eat, third highlight of the day. Your life suddenly becomes really mundane, but that's everybody else's normal life. You suddenly just have to accept that's what life is like beyond. So it's not a regret, but there is that. I think many servicemen and women, when they leave, probably the biggest thing they have a difficulty with is the belonging. And I have to actually, one of the things that does bind us pretty well as rugby fans and players is the rugby community. And so, when I left, I heard about an organisation called Rugby for Heroes. You may have heard of them. And what they do is they put you through a coaching course and your youth referee course in a compacted 1 week long session. You do it around Gloucester. So you come away with what was level 2.
Have you ref then?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It's hard.
Compared to pressure of flying an Apache.
I'll come back to that in a moment.
Walk in the park.
But so this organisation exists, and then at the end of the course, then they give you lots of careers advice, and what they do essentially is they give you a wider network, and the sort of basic premise of the course is, if you can't get a job, coaching at level 2. A rugby club will take you on board, and you'll probably get a job because of the wider network of the rugby environment and the people that we are. And that is absolutely true. And so I continue to support that charity as much as I can. Mike Tyndall's part of it. He's a patron. Nick Knowles, I saw Nick Knowles on Wednesday, actually. So, a fantastic organisation which runs on, along the lines of the rugby values and standards. What was your question? What did you say?
You wanted to badmouth refereeing, but
no, refereeing. Yeah, so I followed my son and his team through from what are they, under 8s now to under 13s, and because I did that course, it nevertheless falls on me to do some refereeing. It's really hard.
Emotionally attached now to your son refereeing?
No, I tell you what I do is
detach yourself emotionally.
I don't wear any of my own coaching kit. I try and be completely as impartial as possible, but it's not the kids that's the problem.
It's the parents.
It's the parents,
exactly.
And it's the expectation from the parents, and your own parents from your own team, and also from the other coaches. And the capacity required to referee, I found more difficult than I did flying, because you're trying to see everything and you can't do it.
It's a compliment, right?
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Well, thanks so much, mate.
Yeah,
well,
thanks, Nick.
first up, thanks for your service. Secondly, thanks for being so honest today of sharing your story with us. It's pretty cool. Thanks, buddy.
And that's it for this week's Whistle Watch, the hot seat. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and we'll see you soon.